Hello and welcome to another macro video. I finally got to the end of my backlog of macros that needed to be added into my book, and so I've got 9 new ones to talk about now. So what have we got first? We've got underlined styles. As you can see, you can have a number of different types of underlining, but how you apply them is not obvious. It wasn't obvious to me anyway. So let's have some text that we can do some underlining with. Right, so basically you apply the underline, just the ordinary underline, wherever you want it, and then when you've done that you can change the style of the underline by selecting it and running the macro. So we've got some bits of underlining, there we go. So if we just select that first bit there and run the macro, which is underlined style, so we get a list of all the different styles we could use. So let's say we'll use wavy, number 9. Okay, so those become wavy, and if we select that area there and run the macro again, we could use wavy double or something, 16, doesn't matter really. So that's the idea. Lots of different underline styles. Right, now the next one is Surname Sorter. So the idea here is that you've got a list of names, forenames and surnames. So let's just select it and create a new document and then paste it in there. So here's our list, and as you can see, it's not in alphabetical order. We've got some J's there and an A down here and a P there, but the surnames are not always the last word on each line. For example, we've got MSc and ASTM and Esquire and so on. So what we do in the program, which is called Surname Sorter, so if we find that one, Surname Sorter, which is there, edit. So here's the beginning of the macro. We've got a line there which is actually more easy to see on here, which is a set of postfixes, as I call them. In other words, words on the end of the line which would get in the way, if you like, of the person's surname. So if we try running that particular macro on the list there, which is Surname Sorter, then what we end up with is, well, the A's look good there, the B's, yes. This guy here has come up the top because it's been sorted on brackets BBC, and we've got a P here which has got an Esquire on it. So if we've got any extra one, and that's not right either, so if we've got any extra ones, we can add those into the list in the macro. So that's comma, so it's comma space ASTM, so I need all of that in there with a pad character. And let's do another one, let's do Esquire, so the space and the ESQ has to be put into the macro there. Okay, so if we run that again, Surname Sorter, then the ASTM is now in the right place because it's MPP, and so is the Esquire, look. Okay, so that's all there is to that one. So right, what's next? Let's move the macros out of the way. Surname Sorter. Right, table edit. Okay, for this one we are looking at problems with tables, and with tables, if you've got things like commas at the end of items or full stops or spaces, let's put the there we go, let's put the visible formatting on. So you've got things at the ends of, like this here, there's an extra carriage return there which we can delete manually, but if there are a lot of these sorts of things, then it can be quite time consuming to do through a whole document. So let's try using table edit, and if we just select, you can work on all the tables in the whole document or just the current table. So if I just select the table, and what I will do is, if I get table edit up on my macro screen over here out of the way, I will stop it after each cell. So I won't let it run right through and do them all at once. I'll make it so that I step through and you can see what's happening. So if I run it once, it has taken the space out before origin. If I run it again, the tab disappears after value there, and then the comma here should go, and this is meant to be minus 467, but that's a hyphen, so that becomes a minus sign. And there's an option in the macro to highlight any changes you make. I didn't think it was worth highlighting where a trading space or comma had been taken out, but certainly if you're going to change the contents, then it's worth highlighting. So the next one is a double space there. Then here we've got space hyphen, so that goes to a minus sign. Now that, it looks like a minus sign, but it's not. It's actually an N dash. Oh, it's taken the space and the comma out of there. So then that N dash becomes a minus sign. Another space there. Now this is an empty cell, and I thought that it would be useful to have empty cells changed to an M dash. So that's that. Then another tab there. That's a hyphen in a cell. Again, turn that into an M dash. Nothing in the next one. That's an N dash goes to an M dash, and then that carriage return has been taken out. Yep, and that's it for that table. So if you do those using the macro, then that will speed you up a fair bit. Okay, so what have we got next? Okay, this is, let's get rid of the visible formatting if we can. Move that out of the way. Visible formatting. Right, one new macro mixed in with several others, older ones. Swap previous characters. You'll see in a minute why we want that, but for the moment let's just remind you of the normal ones, the existing ones. So you've got sort there. So if we use swap characters, we can turn those round, so that's swapping adjacent characters. Swapping previous characters would be if you put, so on that one I put the cursor between the characters. If I place the cursor there between the W and the P, and it will swap the two previous characters if I use swap previous character. So okay, so it's swapping the two characters before the cursor. So why is that important? Well, oh no, yes, the other thing I was going to say was that I've actually updated these macros, and if you've got something like that, which is meant to be H2SO4, the 2 and the S are in the wrong place, so if I swap characters there, then the swapping takes place even with the formatting. Okay, so we're going to swap the previous letters. Now, the point for this one is that if you've got something like this, the force at this point, F2, now what you want there is another comma after the 2, because it's like parenthetical comma. So, but if I type a comma there, then it's a subscript comma, which is not terribly helpful. You can see it more clearly if I do it on this big picture here. So that comma there is a subscript, and that's not what we want. So what we can do instead is, if you type the comma there, and then use swap characters, then it moves the comma back. It's the correct size comma, it's not subscripted, and it moves it back to the right place. So that does save a little bit of aggro sometimes. Right, and just while I'm on, I might as well mention the other two, the swap words. And again, we've got swap words, so you can swap those two words over, and it does actually deal with the formatting. So you've got the water is H2O, those two words should be the other way around, so you've got is H2O can be swapped around, including the formatting. And then swap three words, so if that should have been time and effort, then I can swap three words by doing that, swap three words. Okay. Now the next one is well, a slightly new one. It's not very new. Track on off visible. Some of you are very grateful for the ability to see that you've switched track changes off. So if you're working with track changes on, switch on track changes. So then we delete something, then that's in the in a bubble there. You can see it's been deleted. If I want to make changes without being tracked, then I can switch the track changing off, but will I remember to switch it back on again? So if I use one of these, but there were 5 different visible track change off macros, just using different ways of trying to make it clear on screen that something's changed. But my favourite, and I think most people's favourite, is visible track off 5, which does something like this. So when you switch the track changing off, so that you can change things that are and they're not tracked, then it goes yellow, and switch the track changing back on again, and then if we delete that, then that is track changed. So that's number 5. What I did then find was that there were certain cases where the yellow didn't seem to give a very good background. I can't honestly remember what the circumstance was, but I found a solution to it which gave a proper yellow background in those rogue cases, and so that's embedded in the macro that I've called track on off visible. I say it was an obscure problem, so if you haven't got that problem, then don't bother changing from visible to track off 5 to this new one. But that's oh, and as with track off 5, you can actually change the colour if you want to. So if I have a look at visible track off, oops, what happened then? I'm not quite sure what happened there anyway, but let's look at this track on off visible. So if you change the number on there to whatever, you can change the colour, so that if we try it again, this time you've got this really strong yellow background, but that's up to you whether you want that or not. So what have we got next? Yeah, highlight not this size. Now the point here is that you sometimes get text which is not all in the right font size. I don't know whether you can spot anything in this paragraph here, but most of it is 14 point, as you can see at the top there, 14 point. But if you select the paragraph, you'll see that the font size disappears, and that's because within that paragraph there's some text which is not in the same point size as the main part of it. Okay, you probably spot it there. Some there is not the same size, but there are some other bits in there which I've put in there deliberately. Some of the punctuation isn't the right size, so if I use highlight not this size, which is number 3, so I select that and do highlight not this size. Oh, we've still got track changing on, bother, never mind. Turn it off now. Okay, so what it's done is to add a highlight to that. If I accept it, it's added a highlight to the characters that are not the same size as the other. And then if you want to put it right, you can use unify, whatever it's called, just to sweep back across there and move the. If you haven't come across that, that was unify font, was it? What's it called? Unify format forwards and unify format backwards. So you can take the formatting from the beginning of the selection right the way across, or from the end of the selection right the way across. So if that bit was if that was in italic, for example, and I did that to unify backwards, it would make that all yellow, italic. If I went from the sum there and unified forwards, then it takes that across. So that was unify forward and back. Right, now then, what's next? Find in context. This is a very old macro, but I've started using it again a bit, and I've made it easier to load up by producing find in context load. So let's try find in context first. So the idea is that suppose you want to say I want to find something about font that's in different size. You want to look for the word different and the word size, but it won't necessarily say different size. The two words might be separated by other words. So the find in context is find in context is, I can't find it, where is it? Find in context. There we go. Edit. At the beginning of the macro there are two words, well there's three, but just for the moment we'll just use the two. So if I wanted to look for something to do with different size, I could type those two words in there, and then I could search through the document. So I could go to the top of the document and then search by running this macro, find in context, and it's found there different size. Run it again, different font size, and then I used diff rather than different, and so it's found that as well. So that's the way to find words that are near to one another, but it's a bit of a pain having to load them into the macro every time. So the find in context also allows you to put the words you're searching for into your switch list, and if you're a multi-switch user, you will have a ZZ switch list in which you put all your items. Somewhere in that file you can have the same wording that's at the beginning of the macro, where it's looking for the particular words. So I can have different in there and size in there, and then if I want to look for something else, then I can change it there. So I'm not having to go into Visual Basic every time, but it is, it's there on screen. But it's quite helpful if we can load that more quickly. And the particular application that I have for it is when I'm looking for references and citations. So let's find some citations and references, which is my file called rubbish. Here we go. So down the bottom here we've got some references. Let's make that a bit smaller because we want to be able to see, make that smaller as well. Want to be able to see our switch list. So what we can do is we can So we can decide that we want to look for this reference here, whatever his name is, Vandikibus 2010. So we can select from that word to the end of that word. So the first word in that list is going to be one of the words, and the second word, the word at the end is going to be the other word. So if I run find in context load, it asks me how far apart they should be, and I can change that if I want to. That's how many words apart they are. How far away could they be from one another? But if I just press return, I just get the same thing. And you can see that the Vandikibus 2010 has been loaded in there. So if I go to the top of the document and I run find in context, then there's my Vandikibus, and then try again, and there aren't any more because we're now back down to the actual reference. So that's a quick way of loading up. So we can try another one and try this one. Now if you want, for example, to look for something that's in the 2010 range, between 2010 and 2018, you can select only to there. So they've got 201, and then see what that finds. So I can load that up first with the loading program, and so it's got that as 201. So if I now try using find in context, then it would have found that, if that had been 2006, it would have still found it because I'd only asked it for 201. So we can load up quite quickly. There may be a circumstance where you want to find things, a lot of them, very quickly, and so what I've also done is made it so that you can change this feature, assume whole words. So if I make that true, what that means is that if you just select from well, let's say this one, Warner, to there, then what it does is assume you mean the whole of that word, Warner, and the whole of that word, 2011. So if I run the load program, then as you can see, it's taken the whole of Warner. So if we get emergencies and series, then and load that up, then that takes the whole of the word emergencies and the whole of the word series. Right, so that's that one. So where are we up to? Let's move that out of the way. We've got a couple more, I think. So what have we got here? We've got make a phrase italic. Let's move that out of the way. Okay, so this is where, well, this originated when somebody was saying they had to put the italic onto the names of the titles of books, and had to do it manually. So that was a bit of a pain because there are a lot of them, because you've got to select exactly the whole thing. So I wrote a macro so that you can click in the first word and run italicized phrase, which is that one, and so it goes from the word where the cursor was to the next punctuation mark. So that was the full stop. So I click in the next one here, run it again, and does that one in such and such handbook of. So that's another book title. Okay, and then land blah blah blah, another one there, and you'll notice here that it stopped at the full stop with third edition. Not a problem. Move one space past the full stop and run it again, and it will take the other parenthesis, the other end of the parenthesis. It may be that with the parenthesis you may not want that to be included, so you may want to stop when you get to the parenthesis, and so we've got a function there, include parenthesis equals true or false. So it won't italicize bits in parentheses it will stop short if you change that. And I also thought it might be helpful in some circumstances to actually italicize the punctuation mark as well as the text, but so you've got that choice there. Okay, one final one, which really is not terribly rocket sciencey. I'm doing some updates to Dockerlize to try and improve the range of things that it analyzes, and so I asked people, and a friend came up with this one that he wanted all the different ways in which century, 19th century, 12th century, 15th century, whatever, was formatted, and so I said, oh well, just tell me what they are and I'll add them to Dockerlize. But unfortunately it's way too complicated to do that. There's so many of them, and he's distinguishing between whether the th is superscripted or not. So he's found me 13 different ways of formatting, and so I decided it was far too difficult to add to Dockerlize, so I wrote a separate one called Centuryalize, and you can run that separately, and so it just ends up with a table like that with telling you how many times each of those formats is used. Right, well that's it. As usual, the macros are in the book, and that's my email address if you need to query anything. But one final thing though, it did occur to me recently that because my macros save some of you quite a lot of time, you might actually want to express your thanks tangibly. My book does say that you can make a donation to charity on my behalf, which would be really great, but I thought it was also possible that some of you might feel you'd like to make a small personal donation. I certainly wouldn't object to you doing that. Indeed, it would be very gratefully received. Thank you. So if you did want to make a small donation, then I have a PayPal account which I believe you can access by using my email address. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching.